Black revolutionaries, distillery owners, Italian fashion retailers, and Motown Grammy winners all share their best stories never before told in any other media outlets on Detroit is Different. Visit DetroitisDifferent.com or download the Detroit is Different app on Apple's App Store or Google's Play Store.
Detroit is different, back in full effect here with somebody, again, he's like a consummate guest, but also one of the biggest supporters of what we do with Detroit is different. What can we say? MC in Mollywop, so that's even bigger than MCing. Man that does all types of work with our Keebalon Village, and into accounting and helping businesses get off the ground from a grassroots perspective. Father, and my homie, G-Mac, Greg McKenzie. How you doing today?
What up, though?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thanks for having me, Curry.
Oh, man. All the time. All the time. It's always great to have you in effect. And right now, it's a couple different big projects when we think about when you connect to our African-centered principles. And one of the biggest celebrations that's honored African-centered principles for years for a lot of our people in the diaspora on the American side of this is Kwanzaa. And Kwanzaa, as we know, in the principles and everything, Kwanzaa is based on the Nguzo Saba. The Nguzo Saba was taken from studies and research, not just led by Dr. Maulana Karenga, but many of the other people that he was working with in studies and so much, but just like some foundational principles. And what puts this together is a Kinara. A Kinara is the piece or the candle holder, if people would say, like, if you're not connected with the culture, brother, you call it a candle holder, but it is the Kwanzaa Kinara. And right now, one of the projects you're working on is going to be the largest Kinara ever. And it's going to be housed in the blackest city ever, Detroit. It's only fitting that Detroit City housed this Kwanzaa Kinara. And that is a heck of a project that's going underway, included a lot of different builders, architects, designers. I'm sitting in some of the storytelling narrative along with some others. Shout out Bridge Detroit, Orlando Bailey, Bryce Huffman, and others. This project was all encompassing, and right now it's actually reaching out to some of the members in the community that were like, "Hey, what's going on? Like, I want to be included in this project too." But let's talk a little bit about the Kwanzaa Kinara and Kwanzaa celebrations
For sure.
moving forward. So,
Yes, indeed.
Kwanzaa Kinara, what? How did this come about?
Yeah.
What's the story behind it?
So the Motor City Kwanzaa Kinara has its genesis in December of 2021. It's my understanding that Councilman Scott Benson reached out to Infodici Marvis Cofield, CEO and founder of our Keebalon Village, and said, after observing the menorah in the D, and observing Kwanzaa at our Keebalon Village, just wondering like what was the possibility of having a Kwanzaa Kinara on the scale of the other holiday celebrations that are presented in the city center campus marches. So you had a menorah in the D, you had a 100-foot tall Christmas tree, but of the nearly 90% African American population in Detroit, there was nothing specifically to point to that cultural group. So he said, what's the possibility of doing a Kinara on that scale? So, of course, Mr. Kofi said, hey, man, we built the pyramids. We could build anything. And so they got off the phone, and then Mr. Kofi called me, and he said, Greg, what you think about us putting a Kwanzaa Kinara in campus marches? Something that's at the scale of, a larger-than-life type display. And so I'm very ambitious, and I don't really think that anything is impossible. So I'm like, yeah, we could do that, I'm sure. Not really knowing how, then I reached out to an architect friend of mine, Brian Cook, developed architecture. And I said, Brian, if I sent you a picture of a Kinara, could you scale it up to about 30 feet and investigate with me what it would take to build one? And so this is the conversation that started back in December of 2021, toward the end of the year. Toward the end of the month, rather, I meant to say, and started to the beginning, the seeds of this project that is now coming to fruition and going to be delivered in Campus Martius this Kwanzaa season.
Okay, so since then a lot has happened. And first off, I've observed and captured some video and some interviews of this coming together. It's a lot of wood, a lot. You know what I'm saying? I don't even know where you sourced all this stuff. How did you go about even finding the resources to put all this stuff together? And then also, if anybody's built a deck, working in home construction, since COVID-19, it had effects on everything. But the cost of wood has gone up like exponentially. It's like a sheet of plywood in 2018 was like, I don't know, what, $13 or something?
I don't know the prices, but
you know what I'm saying. Yeah, but now, if you buy it, it's probably you looking at you could maybe spend about $60 on some plywood, a sheet of plywood nowadays. You know,
the prices have certainly went up. $60, woo-wee, you buying some serious plywood. But no, for real, if I think carefully about it, our the 3/4 inch pieces that we use, the 4x8s, because they're pressure treated, were $50. High 40s, like 49s and some change. So yes, the lumber prices are up there. I mean, we believe it or not, man, we sourced a lot of this stuff from the Home Depot and Lowe's outlets. The reason being, the lumber yards, believe it or not, prices were more expensive than those. I would expect it to get a better deal at the lumber yard, Eastern Distributors or somebody like that, ABC Building Supply. But when I called them and I compared the price to Home Depot, they just didn't have. They couldn't compete. They were at least $1.50 or $2 more than the per piece price I could get at Home Depot. In some places higher. I mean, in some instances higher. And so they were offering shipping for $79, and the rest is history. But we started off trying to build this out of steel.
Wow.
And so that was the original plan. This structure was engineered in steel. It was architected and then engineered in steel to end up weighing about 31,000 pounds.
Yeah, I was thinking to myself, like, how heavy would that have been? I mean, I'm not saying wood is light either. You know what I'm saying? Like, especially this much wood. It's like
right. It's
really, it's 7 light posts, first off, that exist. So if anybody's ever seen like a light post fall over or whatever, like that's not, and try to roll it like
those
anywhere.
are 700 pounds each. 10-inch diameter, 30-foot long light poles are 700 plus pounds. So even putting them on a high-low and walking behind it with it in the air balanced, at the center, it's still a task to wrestle with. And if you're going too fast, it'll throw you around. So it's been an experience.
It's like
of so many levels, man. But the steel idea actually it beat us to death. We tried for about 8 months to make the steel idea work, and there was just no way to do it.
Okay, and then I guess in this design, why did you guys think steel first?
Durability. We wanted to make a structure that we could put in Campus Martius year after year, and at least get about 10 years out of it before we have to do some major.
Yeah, renovate, light upkeep, like maybe repaint it and retouch for the aesthetics, but nothing like, all right, we got to gut this. And
yeah, we don't want to rebuild it every year, right? So steel was the most durable material that we could do that with, but steel would have cost us about $225,000 to
Yeah, I was thinking to myself, like, if wood costs a lot more, I can only imagine how much steel would cost.
The steel prices were through the roof. And our engineer, shout out to Juan Sneed, JMS Engineering. By the way, this is an all-black team, architects, engineers. And I say that in a very proud way based on the fact that Kwanzaa comes out of the black community. And so the Kinara that represents it, to me, was important to source a team that was all black to bring it forward to the people. So, but anyway, Juan Sneed, incredible engineer. He was looking at the situation and like, yo, this is just not gonna work out. You know what I'm saying? It's not gonna work out with the steel and the pricing. There's no way we can do this cheaper than this like $250,000 ticket. And of course, that was way outside of what we originally. Budget, we originally dreamed up something like $75,000, but when we were thinking of steel prices, we were thinking in the past, pre-pandemic steel prices, but still, still had gone up.
Post-pandemic, it also just so that like this is really where life impacts like a lot of changes, supply chain and everything. Like steel, for the most part, is manufactured and created in China now, like a lot of things. At one point in time, obviously, American steel was a heck of an industry. We think of Andrew Carnegie, and the monies connected to steel in the industries Carnegie created for the skyscrapers across America. But now, you're shipping in steel more than likely from either China and then actually a lot of places in the continent of the motherland in Africa. It's not, in the production world, even lumber itself is coming from across the world too. But, which that's where what was revealed. So a quarter ticket, that's heavy right there.
Yeah, so we had to abandon the steel. So we started thinking about all kinds of ways to do it. We thought about printing it in plastic, 3D. But nobody has a printer big enough to do that.
Yeah, I was thinking to myself, like, yeah.
We thought about, we came to wood last. We went to light gauge metal stud framing, and we thought that we found the solution that would work well for us. In light gauge, we got closer to our price. We got, a lot of our questions answered. But the light gauge still didn't quite work out when we started getting into the details of the engineering and fabrication drawings. So we ultimately landed on wood with the steel frame to undergird the wood, but the primary structure being built from pressure-treated lumber.
Okay, and then I got to shout out Detroit because this is another one of the places in Volcano. My homie, people know Mike Willingham, and review my interview with Volcano. This is one of the few places on Earth where you have an abundance of black engineers and architects.
Right.
Detroit is abundant of that. Like you can't pull off projects like this even in Atlanta or Houston and some of these other places because it's an abundance of them. Like, you may, at the right event, you know what I'm saying? Just like regular, whatever, Little League football game, three brothers can start talking some engineering and all of them are engineers in Detroit. So that's another asset from the Detroit is Different lens that I like that you poured into because this is one of the few places on earth where you can actually get an all-black team to engineer and design something like this.
Right. Yeah, so, man, shout out to them guys, man. They put in a lot of work. This wasn't easy. It went through several iterations, several revisions, but we found it. We found the recipe that would work, and so it ended up being pressure treated lumber and marine grade plywood to cover it. And so we hit the ground running. We found brother Steve Mason, and actually, ironically, shout out to Steve Mason, Semi Energy Renovations. He's the carpenter working on this, and he don't want no press, so don't put his picture up.
Okay.
Like, no interviews, please. But
yeah.
Steve is one of the hardest working, best work ethic people I've seen in the trade. But he's done a tremendous job of building the structure and pulling it together. And so now we have a Kinara. We have the whole structural part of it together, and those poles, back to those wooden poles. I had a meeting yesterday with the team.
And I do wonder, I was thinking to myself as I was looking at them, because I've been to the site, and you all will see more of this soon, like the couple with this next video coming. Like, I was thinking, like, they need a crane? It's like they're going to have to roll out, and they may need a crane to line this up and then place it. Like, what's going on? But this is definitely where, like, one of those people, I did not like geometry. But, yeah, geometry does play a role if you're doing stuff like this. Physics plays a role. Like, all those classes that, you were in high school, like, I ain't going to never use this. They're using a lot of that in this. Chemistry, because of the weather treatment. And then the engineers need to do they need to do the stress test on this load. Because, like, I mean, think about, like, how windy just yesterday was, you know what I'm saying? And you got these 700-pound posts, that will be, celebrated and exalted in the city. You have to make sure that stays structured, sound, stress tested, and all of that, weatherproofed and ready for the wind and other, all of this comes into play.
So much, right? Mm-hmm. But when we were investigating the poles more closely yesterday, we discovered that, we bought 10-inch diameter, 30-foot long utility poles from New York, and they were trucked in. The best I could do to get a quality control on them was have the guy take a video and let me see him walking around them and inspect it from that and say, okay, ship them. But, we were looking at them very carefully. They are not all 10-inch diameter. Some are 11 and a half. Some are 12. Some are 9. Yeah. Some are pregnant in the center. And so we go from a 10-inch diameter in one place to a 13-inch diameter somewhere else in the pole. Like it wasn't easy to see that on a video. And so now the poles have a big question mark on them. But that's what this project has been.
Ingenuity.
All along the way, there has been problem after problem after problem. And at first I was like, man, why this just can't flow smooth? But now I'm like, okay, this is just our newest problem. Because we have encountered problem after problem, and then we've had to develop solution after solution. It's never been done before. There's no blueprint. There's no track record, no precedent that we can follow. We're establishing it with the work that we're doing now. So these poles most likely will get sold to somebody else, and we'll be using a very creative type of structure that you could see similarly used in auto show applications. There will be a hollow cylinder that will come together sort of like a cage that will be snapped together in 5-foot sections and then a piece of fabric.
Almost like and I've seen, like you said, a lot of like exhibits, like where they'll have like, and it's similar to like the PVC piping, but like it's like usually like some type of aluminum or something, like, and you snap those, and then it goes up, and then like it's like design or something in the middle. But
imagine a 30-foot long sock that fit tightly over it.
So now you and see, I like that we're having this discussion because this is like the Bill Nye Science guy, and anybody who knows me, obviously I'm an inner nerd with all this information I keep, but this is why engineering and solving problems, what it looks like what material do we need, how do we go about it, and then even like you have these posts, and now you're not in the selling 700-pound post business, but now you must sell those to get back some of the money on what the materials is, and then along with the sale, it's like logistics, like all of these things start coming into play down to the detail, and you start understanding what the foreman and the project management, and that's really your role in this. You're the project manager of this. What that role of project management is, like you're tasked with when everything goes smooth, it's almost like you got paid for nothing. Right. But when the problems present themselves, you're the person that everybody's coming to.
Yep, and you underpaying yourself for sure, no matter how much you pay yourself, because this is an all night, all day. So if there's a problem, the other people on the team get to be like, all right, Greg, call me when you get it worked out.
Yeah. Like I'm, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm a woods craftsman. That's what I do. This seamstressing a 30-foot, because now it's like fabric. Making sure you have enough of that fabric. Where do you buy that fabric from? And then the seamstress that can sew that together. I mean, this ain't, you know what I'm saying? This ain't I don't even know what it is. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like My Little Pony dress socks type stuff. Right. This is like some real, heavy duty, like we say. It still must do the stress test. Yeah.
It's all of the things. So, but you know what, man? This has been fun. Mm-hmm. This has been a lot of fun to work through these problems and to work with this team. Everybody is, very sharp and professional. They have a lot of expertise, which is very helpful. And being in the industry as long as they all have, I even got to shout out the warehouse that we're using to build this in, 3LK Construction, Lorenzo Walker, someone else who doesn't want any credit or any attention. But, I mean, he's given us the warehouse space for a very deep discount first. Let me say that. And then second, Lorenzo is plugged into the construction world in ways where if I go to him and I say, man, I can't find these scheduled 26-foot length pipes, metal pipes that I need. He like, oh man, call Federal Pipe.
Yeah.
Like, and almost got the number off the top of his head type of thing. Like, I mean, just an invaluable resource to the point where the problem solving becomes that much more easy.
So with something like this, is you're right. You're establishing the precedent in the blueprint so that like when Atlanta and Houston and the other cities get this, Oakland, as they get this, and LA, they'll kind of at least have a framework around what this is. So that's the other task that I'm sure excites people, but also, you know, being ready for how this rodeo's going, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like what this rodeo's going to look like.
Yeah.
And as all of this comes together, like even as you buy supplies, like, so, you know, this is as much as we're talking Kwanzaa Kinara, this is project management 101 of knowing how, you know, how you have to budget and where you spend money, when you spend money, and being clear about like, you know what it's like buying supplies and talking to a person.
Yeah.
You know, it may be a difference between if you buy right now, you know, Thursday at 1:00 versus Thursday at 3:00. Because that could be the difference between the shipment arriving next Tuesday and possibly Friday.
So let me share this with you. Steel quotes are only good for 24 hours. That's how frequently the pricing in the market changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally. So, like, if I got a quote today, if I don't pay for it today, tomorrow it's going to be different. And it could be different in my favor, but it also could be different
that's
in my
the
detriment.
gamble. Yeah,
right.
That's the gamble. You know what I'm saying? You sitting here looking at the elasticity in the market. It's like, okay, one second, they protesting in China and Hong Kong's, you know, they saying that it's like, oh man, no, they protesting. They thought China was going to open up and break its COVID restrictions. You paying attention to international politics, the impact a project that you're doing. Like, this is life, you know? And as you see my nerdness of it all, like,
because you're giving me way more credit. I'm not paying attention to international politics, but
it all impacts.
I'm impacted by them.
Yeah.
In this project for sure.
Yeah, I mean, all of this stuff impacts and it flows. So, like, I think it's keen to be aware and then to still pull something like this together because you still have your deadline of when the project will be read, you know what I'm saying, at the ribbon cutting.
Yeah, people
gonna cut and it's there.
That's it.
When will that be?
December 26th is the official date that there will be a gathering held at the actual Motor City Kwanzaa Kinara, but it's going to arrive on December the 16th at 4:00 in the morning, and we'll assemble it and it'll sit there for 10 days for many reasons. We'll be continuing to tighten the structure, do finishing touches that you can only do once it's sitting in place, and just give people some suspense. What is this? What's going on? There'll be information, of course, that will go out. This will be, another opportunity for more conversation, more discussion around it.
Okay. All right. Now with that, and it's definitely also, we're just speaking about the build of it, but also like even within our own community, it's been questions and things like that. How have you, gotten some of the word out as Detroit is Different is pivotal in that, as I was like, okay, let me wait till at least the first week in December to get out some of the information. But in that, as some of this information is slowly released.
Yes.
And some of that slow release was something you didn't plan.
Right.
Let's share it and have that conversation.
Yeah. So basically, collectively, let me put it this way: there's a triad that assembled to produce this Kinara. The idea came from Councilman Scott Benson. He reached out to Al-Kibalan Village. Al-Kibalan Village jumped in to assemble the team to do it and to ensure that it was community led and guided. And then, of course, things cost money. And so thinking in terms of who pays for the menorah, who pays for the Christmas tree, Downtown Detroit Partnership became the third leg of that triad because they provide the financial underwriting for those other two structures. And so basically we all began to meet and, develop the ideas and plans for how this would roll out. Starting like last February at some point and going forward every 2 weeks since then. Now we're up to meeting weekly because how close we are to the event. But At some point along the way, we collectively developed a press release. I co-authored it with Lisa Parham from the City of Detroit's Civil Rights, Inclusion, and Opportunity Department. And it was a very balanced press release. It talked about all of the parts that go into this and took quotes from many, many people involved. However, once that press release got out into the world, CBS News picked it up, and they elected to lift only out of it the quote from Councilman Benson and Mayor Duggan, probably for clickbait purposes to get the most out of visibility when they put it out in the public. But the blowback from that choice was that it made it look like the Kwanzaa Kinara was being given to the people of Detroit from the political arena instead of from the community arena. And so this thing belongs to our Keebalan Village, even though it's paid for by DDP, and even though the ideal originated with Councilman Benson, this belongs to our Keebalan, and in this way, it belongs to the community. That wasn't obvious, and that still really hasn't been articulated in the larger press media. That's why Detroit is different, and our own media outlets are important, so that the stories that aren't clickbait related can get told, and the full truth will have an opportunity to have its day in court, so to speak. So, but the bottom line is that story's out. CBS put it out. Black Enterprise picked it up. Ebony Magazine picked it up. Some other outlets picked it up. But they picked it up and just regurgitated what CBS said, essentially. And so that's the main narrative that's circulating, and that caused some critique, and rightfully so, from some members of the community. And then to add to the climate, the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, who, by the way, was the first group to commit to a sponsorship on this back in January of 2022. But they had an internal decision that caused Kwanzaa to be canceled for the 7 days that is normally held at the museum. And so I think it's going to be held for 1 day now, Ujamaa. But the bottom line is, it started to appear to people like all of this was connected. The Kinara, the Motor City Kwanzaa Kinara, the closing of Kwanzaa at the 7-day level at the museum somehow seemed to be a trick of the political system to deflect people's attention from what the museum was doing and throw their attention onto a trinket of distraction. And I can entirely see how that thought process could come together. But the timeline of it is that's just not the case. It's circumstantially it landed that way, but the reality is this thing started way back in December of 21. And at that time, it was intended to be a launch pad for the Kwanzaa Kinara that would be, not the Kwanzaa Kinara, the Kwanzaa celebration that would be at the Charles H. Wright Museum. And once their celebration was canceled, then we said, oh, well, we're going to need to do a Kwanzaa celebration. We can't unveil this Kinara and not have a celebration, not knowing that the community would ultimately develop a celebration independent of the museum. A celebration was planned for the Kinara. But once all of the parts started to talk to each other, I had an opportunity to meet with Black Legacy Coalition and some others. And so then I decided, okay, so since now we have this celebration and there's a celebration that the community is going to be doing too.
At King Solomon Church.
At King Solomon Church.
Every night. So in that, I just want to rebut or add in, not rebut, but add into this. There's been so many rebuttals for other stuff we working on. This opens up a discussion that I feel like our community needs to have, period. But let's just start with the Charles. I want to speak to Charles Wright and speak to the Kwanzaa celebration and some of the people there. But continue saying what you're saying. But I do want to just put a pin right there because I want to speak to that in a second.
Yeah. So the King Solomon program on Monday is from 6 to 9, and our program originally was going to be from 5:30 to 8. Lighting the candle, the Kinara at 5:30, and then going into a fuller Kwanzaa celebration after. So we changed that. Now the program is going to be from 3 to 5, and it's going to end with the Kinara lighting, so that there will be time for folks to leave that and travel to the King Solomon, and they won't need to try and just decide if they want to come to this. In other words, to not divide us, to keep it where we can do everything in lockstep with each other. Umoja being the whole point. But so that was me finishing that explanation of just kind of sort of how the way that the press unfolded and the way that some of the other circumstances unfolded made some certain types of appearances that weren't not necessarily connected. And so we've been spending some time trying to clear some of that up. I've been talking to some of our community members, and I met with Black Legacy Coalition. We went on Dr. Kofense Chike's show, Black in the Day 313, myself and Kwazi Akwamu, and just attempting to provide some factual information to dispel some of the myths that have cropped up around the slow rolling out of the narrative. And when Detroit is different, narrative hits the streets, then people will have an opportunity to see the full story. They'll hear from the architects, engineers, all of the people involved to bring this thing to fruition.
And first off, definitely when you speak to that first, before I go to the Charles Wright, I think we need to honor the fact that just because of the way we as Black Detroiters have been treated for some time now, and disregarded, it brings about a lot of, you know what I'm saying, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, talks like a duck, you know what I'm saying, it's a duck. But it's that feeling. We've been let out of so many and left out of so many conversations and things that happen in and around our city. Especially when we think about this executive body and the mayor, anything to deal with the mayor. I mean, just the fact that we have a white mayor in such a Black city alone causes for a contentious relationship of anything associated with that administration, and a lot of, especially when we think of Kwanzaa, the grassroots activists that carry this and look to those Kwanzaa principles as values to center themselves, their family, and their works. So that definitely is something to honor. But as I said, within in the reason challenges, may be raised. I've had this discussion many a times. I'm like, hey, challenge me. Bring it on, because I understand where that frustration comes from. You know what I'm saying? No if question. I get a grant and you know what I'm saying, and move here, or, you know what I'm saying, it's like, oh, that white guy, and you were just talking to this person. Hey, you want to call me an Uncle Tom, a Coon, a Sambo? I'm with it. Bring on that challenge, and I'm not necessarily saying I am that, but I understand where that frustration comes from, because having access to any of these assets, as I call it, of the machine, in some ways, it separates you from our people that are where the assets are so scarce in our community, because usually it's us having to engage with this machine to pull anything out of the machine and come back. So I'm understanding of it. A lot of us are not as understanding of it. Yeah. I mean, I look at Jalen Rose's response like, I do more for the Black community by 9 a.m. than all of you. And it's like, I don't think that's the response you should have, Jalen Rose. And shout out, one of my favorite athletes as a kid. You know what I'm saying? That's not the stance we take. We have to be understanding of these frustrations that can cause these confusions, and where things can be deceitful, because we have been deceived before.
Sure.
You know what I mean? This is the day I saw Rizza Islam put up, the CDC today is honoring the legacy of the Tuskegee experiments that they did. And it's like, what do you mean commemorating the legacy of these Tuskegee experiments of allowing these Black men to die with syphilis and watch them die? How are you going to commemorate that? You know what I'm saying? But this is the work, and I'm sure it's brothers and sisters that work for the CDC. Like, we got to do something. This is why people didn't want to deal with us at all. You know what I'm saying? Like, so everything engaging in America with Black folks is always to be looked at and questioned, especially when it looks as if being a Black face, you're engaging and supporting the atrocities of what can be, the criminal enterprise of America, or its you know what I'm saying? Like, I guess it's outreach and everything like that. So I'm understanding of that in the community, which goes right into the Charles Wright discussion. The Charles Wright Museum, and this is a Kari Frazier perspective. First off, shout out Yolanda Jack. I got this email from her a couple months back. I believe it's a money thing, and it's very tough. Because me as a person, not speaking for Detroit is different, and all the people of Detroit is different, I feel as though at one point in time, knowing more of the history of of Dr. Wright, from people like Khaled and Mama Joanne Watson and others, like, to see what's happened, I feel like it's not as inclusive of community. And one could argue it's not as inclusive because that's not where the money at. And to keep that institution to move ahead, it takes money. When Wayne County decided to save the DIA and give some money to the Science Center, their partner right around the corner wasn't giving anything. But so it's like we have such a black city, so the need of a black museum does play a role, but also the accountability and the inclusiveness with the community does matter. And Yolanda Jack, I look at as like she's a part of our community, but she's not given the same. And this is my opinion. She's not given the same influence, power, and say that others that are outside of our community that sit in positions of influence at that museum have. But they will bring her out to engage with the community knowing she has that relationship. Mm-hmm. And it's tough because, I've seen, for generations and what it does. The museums move to, the African World Festival down to Hart Plaza and the cost on top of being in Hart Plaza and what that is. Like, it's been for a while that I believe the museum does not necessarily have the most sanctimonious relationship with the black community here for many reasons. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's tough. So that's one thing to speak to. So now you keep a day for vending because it provides some. It does provide like a economic asset to the museum and in the community, and it's something that vendors look forward to. Mm-hmm. But you're no longer going to have these celebrations where a lot of these organizations for years have leaned on, and now they switched to a virtual celebration. But that virtual celebration during COVID was different, and now people are looking for something in person. And these organizations, and just that reciprocity, it's not as much of a open communication, I think, between leadership in the museum and the community. Because I believe now Yolanda Jack is put in a position where she has to speak for decisions that are made that she necessarily didn't make. You know what I'm saying? And someone does need to be in this position. It's a tough thing. It's a tough role, and I'm not defending or admonishing. You know what I'm saying? Like anything, but even Kwanzaa itself, when we think of the way people tie a lot of histories that have been brought up between the US organization and some of the activism of that organization that was led, Dr. Maulana Karenga led, and certain people's challenges of why they feel as though Kwanzaa is something not to honor. It's like, I do feel that the principles value something. Like, these are discussions that we know are happening inside our black community, especially the African-centered black community, and we can't use them as ad hominem debates. We need to have more of these discussions. And I don't necessarily know, this ain't the discussion because it's more people that would be needed, but these are things that do need to be acknowledged. But the principles themselves, those 7 principles, and then I look at, when I think of Kwanzaa and Nguzo Saba, I think more Mama Imani Humphrey than I think Dr. Maulana Karenga. And how her book, The First Fruits, is the blueprint of what to celebrate. And more so even than the celebration of what Kwanzaa represents, it's the principles and applying these principles to the harvest of our families, our children, our works, our role in community. That's the value of Kwanzaa. and where that represents, as it can center us to move forward. But there are still a lot of discussions to have in and around what this, nowadays it's also like, who were the first people to celebrate Kwanzaa in Detroit? How did that happen? What was, what's the, you know what I'm saying? Like, what are the ways and the engaged? Like, it's many discussions I think that do happen. So it only acknowledges the challenges we have as a community as things like this do arise, they come about.
Yeah, let me share this with you as a major motivating factor for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say it this way. Baba Malik Yakini said multiple times, it appears that as a movement, we've largely abandoned organizing the masses of our brothers and sisters. We are organizing within the groups of us who are already to some degree initiated in the ideals of liberation, initiated in the ideas of, what it's going to take to attempt to restore us to the greatness that is at war to be stripped from us daily. But rarely is that conversation spilling over into those of us who are not even thinking about these ideas or struggling with these ideas, at least in a organized group format. To me, the Kwanzaa Kinara gives us an opportunity to throw a strong beacon in a very visible place where many of our brothers and sisters will see it and potentially get curious, potentially become activated, potentially become more involved in the community. Kwanzaa has the power to do that, and I've seen it happen on a personal level, and observed other people's Kwanzaa stories of it happening to them and with them or with people that they know. And so I'm excited about the possibility of 500,000 black folk pulling more of them toward the efforts that so few of us carry out on behalf of all of the rest of us. Like before I got into I put up parentheses, movement, I wasn't aware that there was a whole community of people organizing, planning, building institutions, and et cetera, to try and restore our people. But now that I am involved in it, I see how few of us are and how much work it is to do on behalf of so many people. Mm-hmm. And so the need to recruit and attract more people is critical. And I'm excited to be a part of that, and I'm out of time.
That works, man. Thank you so much, man. We got a good story as always.
Right up.
Get this going. Peace.
Black revolutionaries, distillery owners, Italian fashion retailers, and Motown Grammy winners all share their best stories never before told in any other media outlets on Detroit is Different. Visit DetroitisDifferent.com or download the Detroit is Different app on Apple's App Store or Google's Play Store.